All right, open to Jude 11. Jude 11 is where we're going to start. I have a modest goal, in my opinion, tonight. My original goal for this evening was to finish the book of Numbers, and then I read Numbers 22 through 24 too quickly, as I tend to do, and couldn't make sense of it. And I don't know how you are when you read something or find something that you don't totally understand, particularly in the Bible, but that is like a worm in my brain, and until I get some sort of reasoning over it. And so I spent the rest of the time looking at those chapters, which we're going to look at tonight. So I'm excited about it. It's a story that you've heard about at least tangentially, because it's very weird, and it's got a Shrek dimension. But it's one that you probably haven't looked at very deeply. Certainly I hadn't until this week, so I'm looking forward to that. But Jude 11 is the first place we're starting, just to give reference to this story, which we've looked at already, in fact, with the rebellion of Korah. But Jude 11 says this: "Woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain, and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam's error, and perished in Korah's rebellion." So Jude, in very Jewish fashion, makes three references to three major stories of the Old Testament, two of which we've already looked at: Korah's rebellion a couple of weeks ago, and obviously Cain in our first weeks of the series. But this one is the one we're looking at tonight, is that what he refers to as Balaam's error. If you know anything about Balaam, you probably know about the talking donkey, which we'll look at, but really it's a speed bump in the story. As for the main line of the story, it really plays almost no role. It's just kind of like insane and funny, and it's probably there's sort of sarcasm where the beast that the prophet rides has more clarity than the prophet himself. There's some of that there, but it's tangential at best. Okay, so let's look at Numbers 22. We're going to read the story. So it's more than we normally read together. We're going to read the story, Numbers 22 through 24. But if it's one if you have read, you haven't read much, more than likely. But it's fascinating, and maybe as we're reading, I want you to try to identify what Balaam did wrong, okay? And it's not a simple answer. It's not one thing. It's similar to Korah's rebellion and the way of Cain, which are complex. But as we're reading, I want you to think, okay, what is it that Balaam did wrong? Maybe what did he do well, etc. That's my kid, right? Sounds like my kid? He's fine. Don't worry about my kid. It's not my kid? It is my kid? No, just relax. Whoever's kid, they're going to be fine at the end of the night. Kids. That's right, yeah. Kids are incredibly resilient. Our kids have fallen down staircases in increasing number the more we've had, because we just stopped worrying about it. All right. That is, by the way, not just that's true. Very hard heads. Yeah, we're known for that. Yeah, well. One of them was certainly on me, the first one. Second one was certainly on Ariel. The third one could have gone both ways. Yeah.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, depends on who you ask. That's right. Exactly right. Okay. Numbers chapter 22. As we're reading, you're looking for what is Balaam's error, right? So that Balaam is referred to, we'll see, a lot throughout the rest of the Bible. It's one of the most common Old Testament stories that's referenced in passing. So let's read together, and then we'll look at the other passages, but just trying to figure out what it is, the dilemma of Balaam. Okay, chapter 22 starts with where we're at historically. "Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho." I'm not going to do this, but this time. But this is key, okay? A historical factor is they are at Moab, which is just on the other side of the Jordan River to Canaan. Okay, so this is the place where Moses will give his final discourse, which is Deuteronomy, before he goes up on Mount Moriah to die. It is the place they will be in until they cross over the Jordan River to go into Canaan, to invade, all that stuff. So that's where we're at, just outside of Canaan. Okay. Balak did as Balaam had said. Wait, that's 23. 22. "And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people of Israel, because they were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, This horde will now lick up all that's around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor. Okay, it's the first time we hear of this character, Balaam, not a Jew, right? But he is sending him to get some sort of connection to God. What God is questionable, but to God, which is near the river in the land of the people of Amal, to call him, saying, Behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, speaking to Balaam, the king is, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. Okay, so there, Balaam has some sort of reputation of having some ability to bless or to curse. Verse 7, so the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, which are tied together, by the way, Midian and Moab, departed with the fees for divination in their hand. And they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. And he said to them, Lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you as the Lord speaks to me. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. And God came to Balaam and said, Who are these men with you? And Balaam said to God, Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, Behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and it covers the face of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to fight against them and drive them out. God said to Balaam, You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, the Israelites, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, Go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, Balaam refuses to come with us. Once again, Balak sent princes, this time more in number and more honorable than the first ones. And they came to Balaam and said to him, Thus says Balak, son of Zippor, Let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will surely do you great honor. And whatever you say to me, I will do. Come, curse this people for me. But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. So you too, please stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me. And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, If the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you. So Balaam rose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the princes of Moab. But God's anger, verse 22, was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. Now he was riding on the donkey, and his two servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. And Balaam struck the donkey to turn her into the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall, so he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the left or to the right. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, Because you've made a fool of me, I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you. And the donkey said to Balaam, Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way? And he said, No. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed down and fell on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I've come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside before these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live. Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now therefore, if it's evil in your sight, I will turn back. And the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, Go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you. So Balaam went on with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam had come, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, on the border formed by the Arnon at the extremity of the border. And Balak said to Balaam, Did I not send you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you? Which means pay you, basically. Balaam said to Balak, Behold, I have come to you. Have I now any power of my own to speak anything? The The word that God puts in my mouth, that must I speak. Then Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath Huzoth. And Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep, and sent for Balaam and for the princes who were with him. And in the morning Balak took Balaam and brought him up to Bamoth Baal, and from there he saw a fraction of the people. Okay, so finish the longest chapter. Balak sends for Balaam. God says, don't go. Balaam says, I can't go. People coming back. Balak sends more men and more money and says, come. Balak hears from God. God says, you can go, do what I tell you. And so he goes. An angel stands in the road, angry that he went. Okay, upset with Balaam that he went. And then Balaam says, if you want me to, I'll turn around. And he says, go with the people. So he finally gets to Balak, and Balak takes him to a place called Bamoth Baal. And it says from there he saw a fraction or a portion of the Israelites. Okay. And Balaam said to Balak, chapter 23, build for me here 7 altars, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. Balak did as Balaam had said. And Balak and Balaam offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And Balaam said to Balak, stand beside your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me, I'll tell you. And he went to a bare height, and God met with Balaam. And Balaam said to him, I have arranged the 7 altars. I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram. And the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak, and thus you shall speak. And he returned to him, and behold, he and all the princes of Moab were standing beside his burnt offering. And Balaam took up his discourse and said, okay, so Balak is paying Balaam to come and curse the Israelites. And so Balak goes to do so, gives his 7 offerings, hears from God, and then repeats what God has told him. From Aram, Balak has brought me, the king of Moab from the eastern mountains. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I behold him. Behold, a people dwelling alone and not counting itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his. And Balak said to Balaam, what have you done to me? I took you, or brought you, to curse my enemies, and behold, you have done nothing but bless them. And he answered and said, must I not take care to speak what the Lord puts in my mouth? Verse 13. And Balak said to him, please come with me to another place from which you may see them. You shall see only a fraction of them, and shall not see them all. Then curse them for me from there. So they do it again. 7 more altars, 7 more bulls, 7 more rams. The Lord comes again to tell Balaam what to say. Verse 18. And Balaam took up his discourse and said, rise, Balak, and hear, give ear to me. God is not man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. By the way, Balaam's prophecies are some of the most famous in the Bible because of how strong they are, how theologically heavy they are. And yet he's, cursed. He's considered a bad prophet. But let's listen. God is not man he should lie, or son of man he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? Behold, I received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot revoke it. He has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord their God is with them, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt, and is for them, like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. Now it shall be said of Jacob and Israel, what has God wrought? Behold, a people, a lioness, it rises up. As a lion it lifts itself. It does not lie down until it's devoured its prey and drunk the blood of the slain. And Balak said to Balaam, do not curse them at all, do not bless them at all. But Balaam said, did I not tell you all the Lord says I must do? And so Balak says, come now, I'll take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God, you may curse them from there for me. So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, which is where the main one happens. It's referenced. And Balaam said to Balak, 7 more altars, 7 more bulls, 7 more rams. Balak does it. Verse 1 of 24. When Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go, as at other times, to look for omens, but set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. And they camped in a cross, by the way. I don't know if you know that. That's another day. And the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his discourse and said, the oracle of Balaam the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes covered. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel, like palm groves that stretch afar, like gardens beside a river, like aloes the Lord has planted, like cedar trees beside the waters. Waters shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt, and is for him like the horns of the wild ox. Love that phrase. He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries, and shall break their bones in pieces and pierce them with arrows. He crouched, he lay down like a lion, like a lioness, who will rouse him up. Blessed are those who bless you. Cursed are those who curse you. And Balak's anger was kindled against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. And Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, and you have blessed them these 3 times. Therefore now flee to your own place. I said, I will certainly honor you, pay you, but the Lord has held you back from this. And Balaam said to Balak, didn't I tell your messengers whom you sent me? If you give me your whole house of silver and gold, I would not go beyond the word of the Lord. What the Lord speaks, that I will speak. Final oracle. And he took up his discourse and said, the oracle of Balaam, verse 17, one of the most important Christological prophecies. I see him. It's immediately about David, but then about Christ. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed. Seir also his enemy shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly, and one from Jacob shall exercise dominion. One from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of cities. Then he looked on Amalek. Amalek was the first among nations, but its end is utter destruction. He looked on the Kenite. Enduring is your dwelling place, your nest is set in the rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be burned when Asher takes you away captive. And he took up his discourse and said, also, who shall live when God does this? But ships shall come from Kittim and shall afflict Asher and Eber, and he too shall come to utter destruction. And then Balaam rose and went back to his place, and Balak also went his way. That's the whole story. Sort of. Let's read a couple verses more. While Israel lived in I'm uncomfortable saying that word, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. Okay. Now, we read a lot, obviously, the story of Balaam. Now, just from the story, thoughts on what is being talked about as Balaam's error throughout the rest of Scripture. What is Jude talking about when he says Balaam's error? What could be, and again, when I ask questions, there's not some objective answer that you're just going to be wrong. You could be wrong, but none of us will know it. But we're just talking. So just from this story, what are some things, anything that comes to mind that was wrong of Balaam? Any thoughts? Yeah, prophet for hire. That's a good way to say it. I'll say it like that. A mercenary prophet. So he was a prophet that apparently could be hired. Like we don't have the Jewish prophets waiting for payment, right? So there's something a little off there. That's great. What else? Other thoughts?
He decided not to follow God's went against the correct command from the very beginning.
Yeah. I'm going to say didn't simply obey. Just didn't simply obey. We'll come back to that in just a second. God told him, you are not to go. Right? It's harder to see, but there's more to it. But God says, you're not going to go. This is the people that I have blessed. Okay? They know about Israel. They know what has happened in Egypt. We know that Rahab talks all about it. She was a Canaanite. They know all about what they did. They know about God setting them free. They know about the wilderness. They know about all this stuff that God has done for them. Okay? With that knowledge, Balaam goes to God and says, he wants me to curse them. And God says, you're not going to curse them. Can't you see they're my people? I have blessed them. But when he sends back some more powerful people and some more moneyful people, he says, let's ask again. Right? Maybe God changed his mind. Yeah, so he didn't just simply obey. He didn't have just simple obedience. One you may not think about, but would have been thought about by the Jewish person pretty quickly, is that he practiced divination, which was clearly rejected by God. Look at 22 first. Numbers 22, verse 7. This is a reminder of this. Yeah, he was practicing divination and didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, that's good. Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's like people say before you go in a fortune teller's tent, ask him if she knows your name. Yeah. Right. There's I'm a man, so I love heist movies. We all love heists. Ocean's 12, Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. Is it Ocean's 12? I think it's Ocean's 12. It is. A guy's sitting in a fortune teller, and like the guy who's been looking for him comes in the door to get him. And the guy says, "You can't see this? You couldn't see this happening?" Yeah, it's great. All right. Verse 7, the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination in their hand, right? So the fees for divination. So we have both of those there. He's for hire, and the thing he's for hire for is divination. And divination to them meant what it means to us, like kind of telling the future. It also meant trying to change the future a bit, right? You're trying to convince the gods, if you will, to do differently. All it means is divining, right? You're trying to change things. And so you don't have to turn there. You can if you want. Deuteronomy 18, we see clearly, and when Moses is retelling the law, which has already been stated once. Deuteronomy 18, for example, verse 9 says, "When you come into the land the Lord God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations." So when you go into Canaan, you should not practice what they practice. "There shall not be found anyone among you who burns his son or daughter as an offering," there's one, "who practices divination," something Canaanites did, apparently, "or tells fortunes, or interprets omens," come back to that in a second, "or a sorcerer, charmer, necromancer, etc." So divination was explicitly sinful, and that's what Balaam was. Right? He wasn't a prophet in the Jewish sense. He was a divinator. He was a diviner. Yeah, thank you. A divinator is better. That sounds much more Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, much more better. Yeah, he's a divintor. Okay, so there's these things. There's also the question of, why does God speak to him? Like, why does God use him? That's interesting. Right? Was he, in fact, did he have a relationship with God? Was he one of God's people? We don't get the answers to those questions. He was an Israelite. We know that. Doesn't mean he was necessarily a false God prophet or a demon prophet even, a Baal prophet. But he may have been. And did he think he was offering sacrifices to Baal? Did he know he was talking to Yahweh? That's difficult to know. The place he's offering the first sacrifice is called Baal, after Baal. So that's a tough thing. It's hard to tell. He calls him Yahweh, so that adds to the complications. Just to say, I don't really know. The 7 offerings at different places, and each one there's a bull and a ram. That's not a Jewish thing, right? He's getting that from somewhere else, which seems like another religion, perhaps straight from the Baals. So there are some weird things there, at least, that says, was God just using him as for his own purposes, but not relationally? It's hard to know those things. Just go with me for a second. It seems like Balak wanted to go to war with the Israelites, but his people weren't real confident, and so he was going to hire Balaam to give his people the confidence he needed to go to war. And I say that because he keeps taking them to different parts of the mountain where he can see smaller portions of the Israelites. He can only see a small portion of the Israelites, hoping that Balaam will say, "Well, yeah, you've got them. No problem." He says, if you'll see them from that angle, then you'll think that I'm good. So I don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. That's the main point. But the biggest thing, I've written too big for sure. The biggest thing is, there's a lot of biggest things. One of them is, I'm going to go blue, his desire to manipulate God, which is part of that divination I was talking about. His desire to manipulate God. And here's what I mean, right? God comes the first time and says, no, you're not going to curse them. They are my people. They will be blessed. But when the second group of people come, he goes, let's give it another shot. Let's give it another shot. And then he does the same thing with the sacrifices, right? He goes and offers the first sacrifice, and God says, no, In fact, says it in beautiful and strong poetic language, these are my people, they're going to conquer. Moab has no chance. It's as clear as can be. And then he says, let's try another one. Let's do another one over here on this mountain. Then maybe God will change his mind. And then we'll do it over here, and maybe God will change his mind. And literally, one of the prophecies, one of the clearest ones we get in the Bible on this subject, he gives is God like man that he changes his mind? Is God like man who says he'll do and then does not do? Right? Harming his own position, that he'll just try different places and try to manipulate God into doing what he wants. And there's that phrase, looking for omens. Chapter 24, verse 1. 24, verse 1. When Balaam saw, this is like towards the end, right? When Balaam saw it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to look for omens. To look for omens. And again, that's not just aimed at telling the future, but aimed at making the future be what you want it to be. Right? So blatantly what he was doing was going to see if he could make God do what he wanted him to do. Okay, so he was endeavoring to manipulate God with the beginning of the story, trying to change the mind with his sacrifices, with his divination in general. Ezekiel 20, you don't have to turn there. Ezekiel 21, for instance, says, the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the way, the head of the two ways, to use divination. He shakes the arrows. He consults the teraphim. He looks at the liver, which is one I'm particularly interested in. But whatever it was, he was doing it. Probably animal liver, and they would try to make decisions based on those things. But this is a common practice in pagan nations at the time. And it seems to me a direct connection with the Garden of Eden where Satan says, did God really say? Did he really say don't go? I mean, it's a lot of money. Think about all the good you could do with that monnie, right? Oh, how easy it is for us to reason our way into God's will, right? Oh, surely God won't want me to do that. I mean, I know it's illegal, but I'll give 10% of it, whatever it is. And so he does that. So did God really say don't do that? Did God really say that the Israelites were going to win no matter what? Maybe if we do it over here. Maybe if I take the sacrifice over here, he'll see things my way. It's an extension of that whole thing, which of course dominates our society today currently. Right? Did God, all the time, did God really mean no sex outside of marriage? He probably just meant make sure you're in love, right? That's our modern view. Just make sure if you're in love, then that's what he meant. Did God really say that? Surely not. Did God really mean homosexuality is a sin? He couldn't have meant that. He just meant no abusive homosexuality. That must have been what he meant. God says no, and we say, he doesn't mean that really, when we should be trembling, when we should be bowing with fear at the fact that our views don't line up with his. Okay, but throughout the rest of the Bible, the biggest problem are the first verses of 25. For the rest of the Bible, the first verses of 25 are part of Balaam's story. Okay? Again, so Balaam rose and went back to his place. Chapter 25, verse 1. While Israel lived in Sodom, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. Okay? The people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. That's this nation. These daughters of Moab invited the people of Israel to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the chiefs of the people and hang them in the sun before the Lord, that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. That is blamed on Balaam throughout the rest of the Bible. That turning to women of Moab, to being seduced by women of Moab and thus by their gods, is blamed on Balaam. Interesting. Look at chapter 31, Numbers chapter 31. Numbers 31. Verse 16. Behold, these women of Moab, on Balaam's advice, caused the people of Israel to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor. And so the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. So here's the story. Balaam is offered money and then more money. And so he goes. Balaam's offered a lot of money if he curses Israel. But he can't do it because it seems like he fears death more than that and God killing him. So he doesn't curse Israel. But on the way out the door, apparently, he says, here's another way. I can't curse them, but you can seduce them. You can send your women. I probably have heard the stories of Israel having troubles with this in the past. If you want to get Israel, this is the way to get them. I can't curse them. God will kill me. But you can do this. That's what, obviously the same author writes a few chapters later. Again, verse 16, behold, these on Balaam's advice caused the people of Israel, these women, to act treacherously against the Lord in the incident of Peor, and the plague came among the people. So, the Moabites' original plan, right? Balak's original plan to beat Israel failed. They got no curse. So they went to the backup plan, which was, we will beat them from the inside. We will send our women to seduce them, to bring them over to our gods, so their God will leave them. And then we can attack. You don't have to turn there, but listen to Revelation chapter 2, verse 14 says this. Revelation 2, 14 says, I have a few things against you, talking to one of the churches. You have some there who hold the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. So it's a very interesting thing in that we don't have that exact explicit conversation recorded, but we know what happens. Balaam teaches Balak how to seduce the Israelites, both to eating, to worshiping false gods and to sexual immorality that leads to the same thing. Okay, flip to the New Testament. Back to Jude. We'll go back to Jude real quickly. Back to Jude, verse 11. We have three things mentioned here. These evil people had gone in the way of Cain, in the rebellion of Korah, and in Balaam's error. We know about the way of Cain. That means that they went by the way of jealousy. It meant they went by the way of being non-sacrificial, right? In a way that Abel was sacrificial towards God and Cain was not. It meant that they were angry, driven by anger. It means that they were not their brother's keeper. Am I my brother's keeper? The answer to that question was yes, and he answered it wrongly. We know about Korah's rebellion. That was a rebellion of pride and self-exaltation. It was about their grumbling and their ingratitude for what God had done for them. What is Balaam's error? Okay, so we know about Cain. We know about Korah's rebellion. We've seen a few things. We said manipulation of God, attempted manipulation of God, though it be impossible. Right, and that's kind of tied up with divination. Attempting to get God to succumb to my will as opposed to me succumbing to His. A very modern problem, of course, one that's always existed. Out for hire, we're gonna call it greed. That being for money or status, money or gain. I know there's no teachers in our world today that teach for gain, but if there were, we would think of people like them that have the ability to say things that are true, which Balaam did, but because of a heart that is greedy, or as a teacher disqualified. Right? That's right. That's good. Yeah. So we think of manipulation and divination secondarily, but primarily wanting to manipulate God to our will. We think about greed and the desire for more, which is a human thing, very 21st century human thing. We think about causing a stumbling block for others, causing others to stumble, particularly with in regard to our basest desires, whether it be our appetites of various kinds. Let's look at two more passages about Balaam, and then we'll be done. 2 Peter chapter 2. Almost done. We'll see what time it is. 2 Peter chapter 2. Verse 14. Okay, looking for the same thing. We're talking about Balaam here. What is being talked about by Peter about Balaam? Okay. Verse 14. Talking about evil people. They have eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin. They entice unsteady souls. They have hearts trained in greed, accursed children. Forsaking the right way, they've gone astray. They have followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved gain from wrongdoing, but was rebuked for his own transgression. Okay, we have virtually all we've just said right there. Look at 14 again. Eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin, enticing others who are unsteady, hearts trained for greed, forsaking the right way. Right, all these same ideas. Causing others to stumble, adulterous people, insatiable desires for sin, greed for themselves. Where did I stop? Look at verse 16 again. Was rebuked for his own transgression. A speechless donkey spoke with a human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. Verse 17. These kind of people are waterless springs and mists driven by a storm. For them the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved. For speaking loud boasts of folly, they entice by sensual passions of the flesh those who are barely escaping from those who live in error. They promise them freedom, but they themselves are slaves of corruption. Big line here. For whatever overcomes a person, to that he is enslaved. Causing people to be enslaved. All right, and then, look back at Jude. We're going to look at verse 10, verse above when we look. Just flip to the right, a couple pages. Jude, verse 10. Verse 11 is when we started with, about way of Cain and Balaam's error, Korah's rebellion. Verse 10, these people blaspheme all that they do not understand, and they are destroyed by all that they, like unreasoning animals, understand instinctively. That is, those basest urges. Destroyed by those more basest urges that Balaam knew would end Israel, would cause Israel's being cursed. We're told in Numbers 31, when Israel invades Canaan finally, that they kill Balaam. Makes a point of telling us that Balaam was killed by the armies of Israel. How much time do I got for that? Yeah. Okay, this story also teaches two things. Okay, it teaches that God is righteous and will protect His people. There's what is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 7 times in the Bible that this story is referenced, which is a lot. 4 of them are telling the Israelites, when Balaam came to curse you, I wouldn't let him, but instead I blessed you. That when there was someone who was trying to harm you, I stood in the way and protected you. I refused to let you be harmed by this evil force. I stood in the way protecting you. As an example, Deuteronomy 23, 4 and 5 says, they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor to curse you, but the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam. Instead, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing. What a Christological thing there. Turned the curse into a blessing because the Lord your God had loved you. The other verses, Joshua 24, 9 and 10. I would not listen to Balaam. Indeed, he blessed you, so I delivered you out of his hand. Micah 6, verse 5. What Balaam answered him, that you may, the God didn't answer Balaam, that you may know that God is righteous. And then Nehemiah 13, 2 said, they hired Balaam against you to curse you, but our God turned the curse into a blessing. God turned the curse into a blessing. There's some comfort here in that, like in Numbers 23, you can listen if you don't want to turn back. In Numbers 23, where he's prophesying, he says, God's not man that he should lie, or son of man he should change his mind. Behold, I received a command to bless. He is blessed. I cannot revoke it. The Lord their God is with them. God brings them out like the horns of a wild ox. There is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. That's the idea of Job's hedge of protection, right? That those things don't work with my people. You can use divination if you want and speak to probably demons and find out what you want about other countries or how to tempt them. It doesn't work with the people of God. That you are protected from such things. One person I was reading about that said, okay, dear Christian, so you can go out on Friday the 13th, you can find a black cat and cross his path, you can find a ladder to walk under and tell of the triumphs of the Lord. That there's no such thing as divination or bad luck, particularly for the Christian. And then finally, it foretells of God's ultimate victory and turning the ultimate curse into a blessing. Balam says, the star will come from Jacob. Jesus says, I am the star of Jacob. The scepter will come from Judah. Of course, that's talking about Christ, the one who would take the ultimate curse and make it into the ultimate blessing. The cursed one who was on the tree, blessing all those who had ever lived that would bow to him. Balam says Israel was going to reign, speaking firstly about David, but ultimately about Christ. Okay. Thoughts, comments, statements, remarks, disagreements, debates, additions, omissions, etc. Anything at all.